All right, we are on. We'll edit it out to where we start, but
That's fine.
we do appreciate you coming on here.
You're welcome.
I mean, first off, I wouldn't mind talking about what we were just talking about, the Golden Triangle. So it's called The Politics of Heroin.
So there is a great, a very well written, documented book called "The Politics of Heroin in Southeast Asia," and it was pretty much an expose on the Golden Triangle and how the U.S. French and how the U.S. became involved in an early form of checkbook diplomacy, which means the U.S. even in the 50s was looking for countries that were willing to kill communists for the U.S. for a price.
What do you mean?
Well, there's really only two cash crops in Southeast Asia: rice and and opium,
Is it still that way?
as far as I can tell. I mean, Vietnam has become an enterprise, but back in the day, back in the 50s, opium poppies, right, yielded opium, or you grew rice. Well, if you grew rice, that was really food for subsistence, to eat, to survive. By growing poppies and harvesting the opium, you had enough money to buy the food, but also have weapons, ammunition, pay the soldiers. And people had private armies that literally were created to protect the poppy fields and to protect the caravans of mules and horses that carried all the raw opium out of the Golden Triangle to processing plants. So opium is converted into morphine, and then morphine is converted into heroin.
Okay, well, a couple of things. One, it just sounds like cartels of today because they have little armies, especially in the Mexican cartels. They have not little armies; they have a giant army that is now protecting their fields and they are protecting their transport. And it is I forget how many $1 billion a year it is. It's ridiculous. It's this exorbitant amount. But then also, when people have these poppy fields, right? My mind goes to who's doing all of this opium, right? And
These huge villages. I mean, it's just a major manpower business of growing the poppies, cutting them so that they bleed the opium syrup,
yeah,
and then scraping it off, putting it into balls, and then transporting it out of the jungle to a plant where, that's it. That's the book. The Politics of Heroin in Southeast Asia.
I'll read this.
That is a great book.
Now, are you saying that there is enough of an enterprise that there's enough heroin addicts out there that you're saying that this is their number one cash crop other than rice?
Yep, that was.
Or are they putting it into pharmaceutical companies?
Well,
Or
pharmaceutical companies are buying opium and using it to processing it for pharmaceutical grade drugs, but we're talking about heroin that's 95% pure in Vietnam.
So, who was it that was the Sickler family, right? They were making OxyContin.
Right, that has nothing to do with.
Yeah, but where are they getting their opium from? Do they have their own private opium fields?
I believe they buy it on the open market.
See, that's what's crazy. So now these individuals who are doing something that's possibly illegal, they're going to the open market, the black market kind of, to purchase this opium, and then they're making it into pharmaceuticals?
Yeah,
Is that what?
It's outside of the purview of the United States government. We're talking about boatloads of opium that are moving around the world to all sorts of countries.
No. The Sackler family. That's what it is. Sackler family. Where do the Sacklers get their opium? Yeah, I mean, this is because they. This family, by the way, is they've kept out of the limelight completely because
Well,
they have children, they have everything, but
right. I mean, they were embroiled in the huge controversy that ended up in some sort of a huge settlement, right?
yeah,
To
but
provide treatment
yes,
after the fact.
they opened up rehabs and other institutions and such, I believe, to then combat it. But that's the whole thing of they create the problem, then give the solution. That's their like the role model for that.
I know.
But now, when you're over there, in what year did you go into the military?
I joined the Army in 1969
Okay.
in the spring. Because I joined, I actually volunteered to go to Vietnam. I was able to pick my professional specialty, which is called the MOS, meaning your military occupational service, and it was law enforcement.
So you chose to go into law. Did you, when you chose that, did you think that you're going to go into law enforcement when you left?
Well, I went to basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and then I had the opportunity to go to this special leadership training detachment before I went on to my advanced infantry training, which was in learning how to become a police officer in the military in Fort Gordon, Georgia.
Okay.
So I went to this leadership training detachment before I went on to that, and I gained some rank. I actually became a PFC by that time.
Private first class?
Yeah. Start out as a private
Yeah.
PFC. And then when I got out of, it was another, I think it was 10 weeks AIT at Fort Gordon, Georgia. By the end of that graduation, I was a full-fledged military police officer.
So does that means you don't see combat, or does that just mean you police
No,
the
then I
grounds?
volunteered to go to Vietnam. So they ended up shipping me to Vietnam in the fall of 1969, and I ended up in a military police-like unit. It was a security company that did a lot of different things in Vietnam under the umbrella of military police, that category.
Now, so let's just say you go to Vietnam as a military police officer.
Yep.
Okay. Well, are you an officer at this point if you're a private first class, so military police?
Just an enlisted guy.
Okay. And are you policing the grounds of the bases over there, or are you actually going in and fighting and trying to find the Viet Cong, I guess it was?
No, I wasn't an infantryman. So I did a lot of different things in the first tour of Vietnam. One of the things I did was on I was stationed in Long Binh. Long Binh was the largest U.S. base in Vietnam during the Vietnamese War. I think it was like 60 miles of perimeter. We're talking massive, sprawling U.S. military base that contained dozens of different companies. There were truck drivers. There was a huge military evacuation hospital there. They had a stockade at Long Binh. They called it the Long Binh Jail. Ironically, LBJ.
Okay.
Interesting acronym.
Yeah, and he got us in there. Well,
But the Long Binh Jail was an actual correctional facility in Long Binh where military personnel went into custody for crimes that they committed.
now regarding as a military police, are you guarding all those 60 miles?
No.
No. Okay. That's
So
protected
one
by
of
somebody
the
else?
jobs, one of the first jobs I had was on the northern end of Long Binh. There was a train station.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. On the north side of the Long Binh, there was a train station, and a train would arrive from Saigon and buses with thousands of Vietnamese civilians who worked on the base for the U.S. military to make everything happen. Logistics for every, I think the formula is for every one guy that was in the field, there was like 7 to 10 other people that were providing support functions for the actual infantrymen that were fighting in the jungle.
Support functions like guides, like someone who's going to guide us through the jungle, or
No,
what's a support function?
So at Long Binh, the Vietnamese did a lot of things. They made food. They served the food. They gave haircuts. The females were what they called mamasans. They actually washed everybody's sheets. They washed your fatigues. They polished your boots. They swept the floors.
Okay, so when we go over there, we now have like a workforce over there that's going to help us out, and these individuals volunteered, I guess, to work for us.
No, this is an agrarian economy. You got to remember, these people had nothing.
Okay.
Which really fueled a huge black market in Vietnam for everything that the Vietnamese didn't have. You know, glass bottles were literally a black market item because Vietnamese could put liquids in them, including gasoline. It wasn't uncommon to be driving down the road and you'd see a Vietnamese woman set up in the blazing sun with half-gallon liquor bottles filled with gasoline to sell it to the Vietnamese that were riding around on their little Honda dirt bikes.
So you're over there now. This is where you're based, Long Binh?
At Long Binh. My first job was I would work at this train depot providing security in the morning. When the trains and the buses arrived, all the Vietnamese had to be searched on the way in to the base. And then at the end of the day, they had to be searched on the way out.
And are you doing the searching?
I am.
Okay, what are you finding?
Anything that they could steal that they could take and make money off of. So just for one example, steel banding, pallets containing material are strapped down to these pallets and the straps are cut. They're just steel bands, right? Mm-hmm. So a Vietnamese is so resourceful. If he could steal a piece of steel strap, he could turn it into a knife, a scissor, a hacksaw, any number of things, hinges for a box. So you'd have to find this stuff in the course of a body search for every Vietnamese every day. So one way they would try to steal it is the Papasans would wear pith helmets because it's the tropical, right?
Okay.
They would wrap X number of yards of banding around their heads and then put the pith helmet on.
I feel like that's the easiest way to find it, though. You just take the guy's hat off.
Yeah, but didn't stop them from doing it.
Yeah. Now, so you were more worried about what they were taking out, not what they were bringing in?
Well, both ways.
What would they bring in?
They would bring in drugs.
To sell them, right?
Sure.
So it's either way, whatever they could take out or bring in, it was money-centric. Right?
Oh, yeah.
It was what they could
It was
do.
all about how do you make money in a black market economy. It's like one of the products that they would bring in would be cigarettes were very inexpensive by the carton for the GIs and the PX. I don't even remember because I really didn't smoke. Well, I did smoke, but I chewed more tobacco than anything else. But you could give a mama san a carton of Salem cigarettes. If she could get it off the base and take it down to Saigon, they would literally remove the tobacco from each individual. They would open the carton, open the packs, take the tobacco out, load the tobacco with opium and heroin, put it back in each individual cigarette, put the cigarettes back in the pack, put the plastic back on the pack of cigarettes, put the packs of cigarettes back in the carton, and then sell it back to the GIs. And it was actually done on a particular street called Hybertrong Street. I don't remember how it's spelled, but Hybertrongs were opium-laced cigarettes that GIs love to smoke.
Okay, so this is the part that you don't hear about. Okay,
and because the heroin was 90-something% pure, you could literally smoke it and get wasted.
I think I've heard a statistic that 70 there's Hyperstrong Street.
Yep.
So I think I've heard a statistic that like 70% of the GIs coming back were addicted to something. It's
I wouldn't be surprised.
like a wild number like that.
And in 69, let me see, 70, they did not do exit screening.
Like when you went back to America?
Yeah. There was, I think they had barrels in these little privacy cubicles where every GI was able to take his duffel bag or his suitcase, go into the cubicle and take whatever contraband in his suitcase. If he was feeling that guilty, he could just drop stuff in this barrel so that he had the final last chance of not getting caught with something leaving the country.
So as a military police individual, are you looking for people who have these cigarettes, these Hybitron cigarettes?
Well, that wasn't what I did in my first tour in Vietnam. I did mostly perimeter security, place security. I also did security for convoys that were moved through the jungle from one base to another. They had the one area in Long Binh was called Tanker Valley, and that's where all the truck drivers loaded up trucks with material, bladders of jet fuel.
Okay.
And they would put together these huge convoys, 30, 40, 50 trucks, and then roll out of the Long Binh and go to other remote bases and deliver ammunition, guns.
They're driving across Vietnam, these convoys.
On these jungle roads.
And now, what is the percentage of these convoys getting hijacked or getting?
Well, they weren't hijacked. They were attacked.
Okay.
Just random attacks at various points. If a truck loaded with bladders of jet fuel gets attacked, it blows up.
It blows up. Yeah. But obviously
so the irony of it is, talk about checkbook diplomacy. The U.S. military didn't have enough truck drivers in the Army to drive all the trucks, so they contracted with two private contractors to use Vietnamese drivers to drive Vietnamese trucks loaded with U.S. military supplies. The one company was called PA&E. The acronym stands for Pacific Architects and Engineers. It was just a civilian contractor company that did work in Vietnam for the U.S. government.
To drive supplies.
One of them was to build structures and to deliver goods. The other one was called...
What is it?
Pacific Architects and Engineers.
And you came in contact with these individuals? Like, you trusted these people?
No.
No? Okay.
So when you put together a convoy with Vietnamese guys driving Vietnamese trucks loaded with Connex containers filled with military goods...
They played a significant role during the Vietnam War, founded in 1955 by Edward Shea. PAE provided cover for the Central Intelligence, for the CIA.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Involved in the construction of 44 province interrogation centers. The first successive contracts becoming the first civilian contractor in a combat zone.
Yep.
And you don't trust these individuals.
Well, what happened was, if you put together a convoy of 20, 30, 40 trucks, Vietnamese trucks driven by Vietnamese drivers, it wasn't uncommon for one or two or three or more of them to just peel off. You're driving on a jungle road with no clearance. They would just make a left or a right and leave the convoy and disappear into the jungle.
And you can never find them.
No. And the Connex container could contain M16 rifles, could contain sea rations, could contain clothing, electric fans. I mean, whatever the material was necessary to support the U.S. soldier was being moved around the country by these private contractors.
And
And the
was-
other one was called RMK BRJ.
Now, majority of the goods being moved around Vietnam at the time, is it being done by these companies?
This company was a major player in moving material around the country.
Now,
Matter of fact, it said right on their bumper, it would say PA&E right on the bumper of the Vietnamese truck.
now, who's going and searching for these lost convoys? Is there a group that's actually now going and being like, hey, we lost 3 peeled off, we got to find them?
Well, sometimes we would go up, and I would go up in a helicopter, in a light observation helicopter, which is called an OH-1, and they would paint numbers on the roofs of the trucks so that you could actually follow the convoy in the air, and if one of the trucks veered off, you could
Shoot it.
try to shoot near it or drop. Sometimes you drop a smoke grenade
Or something to stop the tires, like just
just to get their attention, to let them know we're right
watching.
above you. Go back to the convoy.
I mean, there's no GPS at this time.
no,
there's nothing.
There's nothing.
So you're gonna. I mean, if I was a Vietnamese individual, or I was, even if we talk about the Middle East today, and a foreign country is in my land, right? I'm probably gonna do what's best for me. What are you pointing at here?
RMK BRJ.
I don't think it's that crazy for these guys to be like, I'm gonna peel off and take some of the goods to my people. So
RMK BRJ was another primary civilian contractor that was found to have mismanaged hundreds of millions of dollars.
I think it says, if he scrolls up a little bit, it was 200 million or something. Mismanaged goods.
Yep. And that was another company. These were Vietnamese trucks driven by Vietnamese drivers, and they said RMK BRJ right on the bumper. They were stenciled on,
It says it thought it was due to the RMK BRJ mismanagement, but after subsequent investigation, the Department of Defense reported that the cost overruns were caused by their own internal processes. Oh,
No, that's all bullshit.
yeah.
They cooked the books.
Yeah. I mean, now, so as a military police, you're mainly going to be guarding the perimeter at first. This is your first tour?
Well, Well, what happened was at some point, the northern part of Long Bin Base contained a huge PDO yard.
What's PDO?
PDO is an acronym for Property Disposal Ordnance. And this is a junkyard.
Okay.
Everything that the military used and consumed when it was no longer usable and consumable went into these PDO yards. So we're talking about hundreds of thousands of brass artillery shells, air conditioner units, refrigerators, bed frames, corrugated metal, dilapidated army vehicles that are no longer repairable. I mean, we're talking mountains. These were mounds of metal and materiel that was junk that were disposed of by the U.S. military and were stored in these yards because, got to remember, there's a huge black market in Vietnam. So the military police were responsible for guarding the junk to keep the Vietnamese from getting their hands on it.
What would they do? Jump the fence, come in, try to take it and leave?
Well, they would try to enter through the perimeter, but it was heavily guarded. I mean, we're talking about a barbed wire barrier that consisted of 6 rolls of barbed wire stacked on top of each other, trip wires with flares, claymore mines, guard shacks every so many hundreds of yards.
And you were protecting this?
Oh, yeah.
This is your first tour?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you're
And
mainly...
then next to the PDO yard was a huge ammo dump.
Oh, okay. Of used ammo?
No, this is unused ammo about to be consumed during the course of the war. And we're talking about acres and acres of ammo dump. An ammo dump was huge dirt berms that surrounded on three sides, and then the ordnance was stored inside of the protective berm to afford it some kind of protection from a rocket or mortar attack.
Oh.
Because that's what the Vietnamese would shoot at Long Binh were Chinese Communist rockets, 122 millimeter Chi-Com rockets.
How often was Long Binh attacked then? On a daily basis or on like?
It was sporadic, but it happened often.
And then once, okay, so you're out there, your main goal on your first tour is going to be protecting the PDO and the ammunition.
And then I ended up putting together a gun jeep. So I had to drive from where I lived on the southern end of Long Binh, and I would have to drive all the way to the train station, and in the process I would drive through the ammo dump and through the PDO yard.
And then, so this is a protection thing, and
there was nerve agents there in the ammo dump. I used to have to carry atropine injectors and a gas mask.
Really?
Oh yeah.
And how often would they go off?
Well, that you didn't know. It was only every once in a while, if somebody said they thought they felt there was some sort of contamination.
Have you ever felt it?
I never got contaminated, but I have injected myself with atropine on a couple of occasions.
Just because there was possible contamination?
Somebody said they thought something was leaking. And it makes you really sick when...
Yeah. And when we were using this we were dropping that on the...
Well, Agent Orange.
Yes.
Dioxin.
Uh-huh.
Those chemicals were stored at Long Binh in the ammo dump.
Oh my God. And so this is your first tour. You protect these, right? So when is it that you get your next objective, which is...
Well, I did a year in Vietnam. I was very enthusiastic GI. By the time I left Vietnam the first time, I was a corporal.
Okay.
And I was kind of a super trooper. I was highly motivated. I really enjoyed the structure of the military.
But saw no combat. Like you didn't, or did you in the...
Well, I was shot at and almost blown up a few times, but I was not, out in the jungle fighting the Viet Cong or the NVA.
Okay.
But they were trying to attack Long Binh on occasion.
And so you do a year over there, you go home.
So at the end of the year, the guy that I worked for, a captain, who was the company commander, he thought I was going to be a lifer. Because here I am, I'm only in the Army, like a year, and I'm already a corporal. So he, I guess kind of as a reward, he had me assigned, my next duty station was to be assigned to the Presidio San Francisco, which is a huge military base at the foot of the Golden Gate Bridge on the San Francisco side.
Where are you from?
Brooklyn.
Oh, you're from Brooklyn. So now you're over in San Francisco. So you're still in the military. You've done your first tour. You're now in San Francisco.
So I go home, I have my leave, and then I report to the Presidio of San Francisco, to the Provost Marshal's office at the Presidio of San Francisco, and it's now 1970.
Okay.
So basically, at that time, the Presidio was 6th Army headquarters, which was kind of like the Pentagon of the West Coast.
Okay.
It was a sprawling military base, very active. They had a hospital, Letterman General Hospital there. They had a military hospital. They had a lot of barracks for officers and enlisted men. So I reported to the Provost Marshal of the Presidio, and he apparently had an AWOL and deserter apprehension detail. They was trying to get it to become more effective. It was being run, so to speak, by a guy who was an enlisted guy. He was actually a Oklahoma highway patrolman by profession, but he was in the military. But he wasn't motivated to really give the AWOL and deserter apprehension detail any legs. He did nothing. When I met him, he was sitting in his office chewing tobacco, spitting it into a garbage can.
You didn't feel like he was because he didn't want to be hunting like because what it sounds.
He was just putting his time in. He was just waiting to get out of the army.
So he wasn't really going after these individuals.
No.
So when you're saying it's someone who's AWOL or a deserter, this is what he's in charge of. Someone who runs away, AWOL, absent without leave, right? Or a deserter, someone
More than 30 days.
In San Francisco or anywhere in the United States? Or?
Anywhere in the world.
Okay, so but you're based in. All right, so let's you take his job.
So I take the job over. I can perceive what I needed. What I needed was the ability to put together a team of like 10 to 12 investigators, resources, to be able to actually go out there and either find AWOLs and deserters or take custody of them from law enforcement in the area that I was responsible for.
What area was that?
Well, in California, it was from San Jose to the Oregon border, the state of Utah, and the state of Nevada.
Okay. And now, when you take this position, I mean, as an outsider looking in, I'm going, you're kind of going after your own kind at this point, right?
I didn't look at it that way.
You looked at it as you were more of a police officer?
Yeah.
Going after, and now, did you believe that?
Got to remember, this is 1970. No computers.
Yeah.
No cell phones. So it was all analog. It was all dot matrix printers, printing out huge printout sheets of military personnel in all 5 branches of the service that chose not to complete their military service by leaving and not reporting for duty.
And where would you bring them? To the brig or to go into
Well,
court
at
martial?
the Presidio, we actually had a stockade. We actually had a small jail that they called the stockade at the Presidio, where once we took custody of the people that were captured by law enforcement in the region that I was responsible for, they would be brought back to, my guys would bring them back to the Presidio, to the stockade. And I wasn't involved in this, but I came to be aware that what they would do they would sit down with these people and say, look, you've only, let's say you were a draftee, you're drafted for 2 years. Just finish out your service and we'll let bygones be bygones.
That's tough because if you're drafted, I mean, that doesn't mean you want to be there, and I feel like majority don't.
No, the most didn't.
I mean, I can't blame some of the guys that they're like, I don't want to be here, I'm running
Look,
away.
by 1970, everybody knew that the Vietnam War was a bright, shining lie.
Yeah. Explain that. What do you mean a bright, shining lie? What do you believe was the lie?
That we were fighting communism.
That was the lie. And what do you think the truth was?
I think the truth was the U.S. was engaged in colonialism to the extent that they were under the misimpression that the Vietnamese wanted what America was.
Democracy?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what else do you think was the truth? Do you think the Golden Triangle is part of it, that we're protecting opium fields and we're protecting like a drug market?
We're facilitating the ability of the Laotians to grow opium if they agreed to kill communists for Uncle Sam.
So, wait. So part of the war is we're making trade saying, yeah, you can grow this opium if you get rid of communism?
Mm-hmm.
So do you believe, have you heard the conspiracy of the Gulf, that the Gulf of Tonkin was a false flag?
No.
Oh, you've never heard this?
No.
Do you know who the admiral was on the Gulf of Tonkin?
I don't.
Jim Morrison's father from The Doors.
Really?
Look up the Gulf of Tonkin, Jim Morrison's father. So now when I talked to my dad was he was part of the evacuation of Saigon. He was also part of he was a pilot. He flew C-141s, and so he was
For Air America.
for the U.S. Army or the U.S. Air Force.
Oh, okay.
But when I
Morrison,
talked to
there
him,
he is.
yeah. So this is Jim Morrison's father.
I'm vaguely familiar with the fact that they supposedly there's evidence that the attack on the naval U.S. naval vessels was faked.
That it never happened.
Right.
And this is going down like conspiracy lane of a lot. There's been a lot of false flags that have gotten us into wars, and we don't need to go down that path. But I like looking into it. Jim Morrison's father played a role in the Gulf of Tonkin.
How about that?
That the lead singer, Jim Morrison's father, was a flag officer in the U.S. Navy. Lesser known fact of his father.
The justification it needed to escalate the war.
To begin it, right? It kind of began the war, didn't it?
Well, look, the U.S. involvement in Vietnam began when they agreed to take over the colonialization of Vietnam from the French. We're talking the 1950s.
Well, that's another thing too, right? The Vietnam War was going on for 10 years before we got into it, right? The French were fighting the Vietnamese for 10 years before we got involved. So,
Post World War II.
yes. So then the French pull out and we enter, right?
We took over the reins. We actually occupied the country as a colonial entity.
And this is where people believe that the Gulf of Tonkin, I could be incorrect on this, but where we needed a reason, when the French were leaving, that we needed a reason then to say that we need to take the place that the French had.
I think the naval aspect of that is certainly a very warlike justification for escalating the war. Even without the naval, though, the U.S. military as advisors were injected into the South Vietnamese military in a non-combat function. Knowing full well that if you're going to have American military advisors trodden around the jungle with South Vietnamese soldiers fighting the Viet Cong, the Americans are going to get shot at and killed, and that's going to be a justification to escalate the U.S. military presence on the ground in South Vietnam, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. This right here, it just says, on August 7, 1964, Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which allowed President Lyndon B. Johnson to escalate the U.S. military efforts in Vietnam. So because that happened, it gave him the reason, right?
Well, I think they realized that the NVA were in North Vietnam, north of the ZMZ, and they still were not fully aware that the Ho Chi Minh Trail, that informal highway to ship all the NVA, the communist troops down into South Vietnam, they were infiltrated into the country through the jungle, and all their material, all the guns and ammo and artillery and cannons and whatever were coming in through the jungle.
Now, but why? This is
because Hanoi is in North Vietnam.
Yeah, I don't know much about Hanoi.
Well, that would be like the capital of the communist regime in North Vietnam.
But,
and that's where the Gulf of Tonkin is, right off the coast of North Vietnam.
Okay. Why was our boat even sitting over there? See?
Antagonism.
Feel like I don't know too much about. I don't know the beginning and so much the end of Vietnam, where what exactly, and what the South Vietnamese were saying, hey, we need the U.S.'s help. Can you come help us?
No, it was more of a bribery scheme,
Over the opium or something?
Well, you got to remember, South Vietnam persecuted the Buddhists, who were the majority. The Roman Catholics hated the Buddhists. The reason why Buddhist monks set themselves on fire in South Vietnam early during the Vietnam conflict was because the Roman Catholic government were persecuting and killing Buddhists.
This is before the U.S. enters?
Though while they're under the guise of
I've never heard this before. So you're saying that the Roman Catholic government that was in South Vietnam at the time,
persecuted,
are they
the
Vietnamese
Buddhists.
individuals that are Roman
They're
Catholic?
Vietnamese, but they're Roman Catholic.
And they're going after the
They're
Buddhists.
in a minority.
And they're going after the Buddhists and setting them on fire, or the Buddhists are setting themselves on
they're
fire?
setting themselves on fire in a protest as a way of making a moral statement about their persecution by this Roman Catholic government in South Vietnam.
I've never heard this before.
Which is propped up by the U.S. government.
And why would they be doing this? Why are they?
Because they agreed to kill communists for Uncle Sam.
But why is Uncle Sam so worried about communism in Vietnam at the time?
The Great Red Scare.
Yeah,
Gotta remember, Kennedy's president. He's Catholic.
Yes, in the beginning of it, yeah. Yes, he is Catholic. I think the only Catholic president, other than I think Biden was considered Catholic, not practicing or anything, but I think Kennedy was he was definitely the first Catholic president, and then the only, I think. I think Biden might have grew up in Catholicism.
But he had a great impact on U.S. military presence in South Vietnam.
Now, so Buddhist protests and self-immolations.
Yep.
I've never heard this before.
Yep.
And
so Diem had a brother. Diem and his brother. Diem was the president. He was corrupt. Him and his brother were the ones that were assassinated on orders from the U.S. military because the U.S. government lost control of Diem and his brother because of the extreme corruption.
What kind of corruption? What were they doing that was
bribes? Look, we rented that country in order to fight the war of communism.
To truly fight the Vietnamese, or were we fighting Russia or China? Like, well, because China was supplying North Vietnam, right?
Right. China was providing materiel to the North Vietnamese army, who were also then sending advisors down into South Vietnam to recruit the Viet Cong, which are the local patriots that were trying to free their country from colonialism.
Which the French did.
And the Americans did. The Americans were doing the same thing. They just took over where when the French were kicked out of the country, U.S. moved right in the 50s.
I know this is kind of off topic, but the French and the Vietnam did create my favorite sandwich, the banh mi. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
Oh, it's my favorite sandwich in the world. And I know there's cafes that you can find that are
What's in it?
Usually a thinly sliced pork, cilantro, cucumber, carrot, and then a sauce. That's it. It is probably my favorite sandwich on the planet. And this isn't the only thing they did when it came to the cuisine. So I was a head chef. I was a head chef for years, and so I like this type of blend where the French and the Vietnamese influence together that created certain foods is delicious.
One time when I was in
Go
Saigon,
get one of these.
When I was in Saigon, I actually went to the Nuc Mam factory. You know what Nuc Mam is, right?
No, what's that?
Fermented fish sauce.
Oh well, yeah.
It's like the sauce of Vietnamese.
Oh really?
Yeah. And
Fish
what they do
sauce.
is they just take all these fish and they ferment them in these huge vats.
That sounds disgusting.
It
took me years to like fish sauce, actually. Yeah. But I like it now.
So in Vietnamese, nuc is water.
Okay.
Nuc mam is fermented fish sauce. Nuc da is ice, and nuc dai is urine.
Oh, what? Is there urine to help ferment it? Is that what you're saying? Oh.
No, it's just the use of the word nuc.
Oh, okay. But I know this was kind of a little segue on this, but yeah. I do. If you've never had a banh mi sandwich, it is delicious. It's just very fresh, and I could eat 100 of them. I ate one the other day, actually. I think
French cuisine.
But then you have this Asian blend with it. So you have the French cuisine coming in there. There is several restaurants that I've been to. There's one, it was my favorite restaurant in Jacksonville, Florida, where I lived. It was called Paris Banh Mi. And it was this little kind of a drive-through, somewhat
Wow.
fast food type style, but they would have banh mi's and then they would have all these French pastries. And they would also have noodle dishes and such, but it was the best food that you could get down there. And it's like tucked away in not such a great area, but I loved it. And little torpedo rolls. But so this is the part of the Vietnam I
You're
don't.
making me hungry.
Yeah, it is. I think actually my family's putting the banh mi on their new menu they're coming out with.
Really?
Yeah, spoiler. But so this is the part of the Vietnam I don't truly understand where. Like we're being told that we're going over there to end communism, right? And there's a draft that
We're
happens.
not to end communism. I think it was a constant perception that the United States was still threatened by the Red Menace, and that communism, wherever it was thought to be
Exist.
emerging,
Yeah.
the U.S. had the right to fight communism, even by using other governments to do the fighting for them, and just writing the big check.
Do you think that's true, or do you think that is
In
used?
Vietnam, it was for sure.
You don't think it was just used as we're gonna run on. There's communism over there. We need to end it. Make sure it doesn't blossom into anything, and we're gonna use this as the main excuse of why we're going over there.
Well, it was basically, I think it was best explained to Americans as the domino principle, the domino theory.
Sure.
That if Southeast Asia falls, the next domino is Malaysia, the Philippines.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That was the domino. The closer it was getting to the United States.
Who were the dominant communist countries at the time? Russia and China.
I would think so.
Okay. And it sounds more like the wars that we're kind of fighting today, where Vietnam is being supplied by outside forces right now, right? Because China is mainly supplying North Vietnam, right?
Right.
Is Russia involved in this?
I don't know that.
Yeah, I don't know either. I don't think I ever heard
I
that.
don't think they had the military industrial complex to do it at that time, because Russia was still pretty.
Well, saying that term right there is, that Eisenhower speech after World War II, where he talks about exactly what we end up doing.
Exactly.
And we go over there, use the military industrial complex to get whatever we want. That's where I think what I'm kind of laying out is it sounds like they're using this to really go and get what they want over here. They're going to use this, I'm fighting communism, or we're going to make sure it doesn't emerge into anything. But what we're really going after is possibly the poppy fields, trade over there. I don't know. There's a lot of conspiracies of what.
You got to remember the French also lost a lot of rubber plantations. In South Vietnam, it was rubber trees grow very well, and the Michelin rubber plantation was in the Iron Triangle, which was in South Vietnam, which was a major source of rubber for tires.
So I didn't know this until probably like maybe 2-3 years ago, where rubber came from. Did you know where rubber came from? Trees. There is a rubber tree. Now we make it synthetically and we use oil and such to make rubber, right? But back then, especially during World War II as well, I think China had a large trade in the rubber trees as well. But they actually, what they made rubber out of came from the sap of the rubber tree.
Yep, they actually.
And it would peel around the tree and the sap would come, and that's what they made rubber out of.
Huge rubber plantations in South Vietnam.
Yeah. So.
And specifically the Michelin family.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, what? So the Michelin family. Oh, French. Oh, that's French, isn't it?
That's right.
Oh, and that's where the Michelin. That is actually where the stars of the restaurant come from. Is from.
Well,
it is the same
spin-off. Yeah, exactly.
It is the same family though.
Exactly.
It is the tire family is actually the grading system on the restaurants as well. The 1, 2, 3 stars.
Yeah.
Which that's interesting as well. But yeah, this is where rubber actually originally came from. Was from
Matter
trees.
of fact, in Vietnam, it wasn't uncommon. When I would be moving around, you'd see the remains or pieces of rubber plantation trees. The U.S. military was not allowed to destroy them. Mm-hmm. So if they built like a military base, you had to build around the rubber trees.
That sounds like the poppy fields too. That sounds like the same thing. We're going to protect whatever. So, I mean, this is. I don't know much. All I know about the rubber trees is this, but it seems like once you use a rubber tree, you kind of have to destroy the rubber tree. I don't know how much. It's just, they peel away the bark, right?
No, it regrows.
It does? Mm-hmm. Okay. As I know, during World War II, that was another thing. I mean, that's how we made our tires for our tanks. That's how we made our tires for everything that we used it for.
Rubber.
And that was something that we were protecting as well in China. I just think I mean, I know we're mainly talking about Vietnam, but World War II being a world war wasn't just that there was all these forces fighting around the world. There was this as well, like trade that we were going into other countries because we're in Africa and in China and getting other supplies that we needed.
Yeah, taking advantage of the natural resources and making money off of it.
Yeah, that's where the world war part of it comes in. But
it applies to everything: sugarcane, bananas, pineapples.
Pineapples. What are pineapples doing?
I'm just saying.
We're just eating them.
Right. And now it's palm oil.
That's in South America, right? So that's a big one in Brazil. I know the palm oil is big in Brazil because that goes into the Amazon rainforest while they're burning down a lot of the Amazon rainforest.
In order to create agricultural space.
For palm oil.
Palm oil.
That's a huge one.
That's right.
Like they're burning, I know a lot of the Amazon down for livestock. And they're growing a lot of livestock there, but it's this whole palm oil market. So there's a fight with vegans and vegetarians that it's not just about, when it comes to the Amazon and such, that it's not just about the animals being affected, but it's these huge, so they're very anti-palm oil. I know it's not just, I mean, it's activists and such, but.
Well, it has to do with global warming and.
Oh, yeah. I understand that. But a lot of the Amazon.
Carbon, being able to. Unable to recover the carbon.
Yeah. Have you ever heard do you know who Graham Hancock is?
I don't.
Do you know who he is, Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he has a TV show. I forget what it's called. It's on Netflix, but he was talking about how the Amazon rainforest is, none of the soil is natural. It goes back to the way that they farmed the Amazon hundreds or thousands of years ago. It's actually all the soil that they created themselves. So all the soil that's there now never existed in the Amazon rainforest. It was brought there or created there.
Well, I think that you can create soil by burning down.
Oh, like carbon.
Burning grass.
Yeah.
Burning down the trees.
Yeah. But, okay, so getting back to this. So now you go over for a second tour?
Well, so let's get back to the Presidio.
Okay.
So I put together a pretty cohesive unit of guys, and I create loops for them to travel either by Army van or by airplane to go to pick up these AWOLs and deserters and bring them back to the Presidio. So this is 1970. My guys could actually get on airplanes with loaded handguns. The only requirement was that they put the investigator, the military guys, would put the prisoners in the back of the airplanes. We always had the last 4, 5, 6 seats in the back of the airplane.
Is this mainly in your area, like the San Jose up to Oregon?
That was mostly driven. I would put 2 guys in like an OD Green military van, and they would drive up the coast to Eureka, Crescent City, come down just west of the Sierras, and then come back to the Presidio, go down to San Jose is below San Francisco, and then come back to the Presidio and pick up however many prisoners I had made arrangements to pick up from law enforcement.
Are you going in and finding these prisoners yourself as well?
Most of them were caught by law enforcement in the course of them being arrested for various crimes, shoplifting, armed robbery, car theft.
So they get caught shoplifting and they run
away? Some of them
were
just for hitchhiking.
Wow. Was that illegal?
in some places it was a probable cause for being able to stop someone and ID them, and then they would. I was constantly fielding phone calls from law enforcement that I had to verify this list of 60,000 AWOLs and deserters from the 5 branches of the military that they were actually wanted for the violation of AWOL or deserter.
So this is mainly in the United States at the time. They are grabbing these individuals
In these 3 regions that I articulated.
And are they just in a house? Do they know you're coming? Are they?
Well, they're already captured. They're either in a jail or a sheriff has them
Where are you
handcuffed.
capturing them from, though?
They're being caught and arrested and held in custody by law enforcement agencies all over these 3 states.
Yeah, but so where's I guess what I'm asking is, you find out someone is somewhere, right? So you're doing it. You're a detective. You're investigating. They're in a home. You're now busting into the home, putting them.
They're already caught by law enforcement. They're being just
Okay.
handcuffed. They're in a police station somewhere.
And you're picking them
They're
up.
handcuffed to a bench or in a jail cell, or they're handcuffed to a ring that's bolted to a wall and a little.
So the police,
Police
the
station.
the local police know that these individuals are deserters or they've went AWOL, and they're looking for
confirming
them.
it with me,
Okay.
and I'm verifying that, and then I'm sending people to go pick them up.
Gotcha. So I'm thinking that you're going out there saying, all right, John Doe is possibly in Eureka. Let's go find him. So that's not what you're doing.
Well, sometimes you would get leads from jealous ex-girlfriends or relatives. Or, people would call in and they would. Well, got to remember too, I'm paying money for this information.
Okay. Wait, to the girlfriends?
To anybody.
Are you paying off girlfriends and family members?
We're paying $25 that leads to the capture of an AWOL or deserter, or $35 if they're in custody already.
You're paying 30, so you're not getting paid. You're paying off these people.
Where there's a reward.
Oh, wow. And so were you just getting calls all the time saying like,
Yeah,
hey,
all
my
the time.
boyfriend is in the back bedroom right now?
Yep.
You're getting that? Are you serious? You're getting that call? Like, he's here right now. And
Or my ex-girlfriend is now dating a guy and he's AWOL from the Army.
oh, what a brat. Oh, my gosh.
And then I would make arrangements for them to be taken into custody. And then I would have to make arrangements to send my guys on a trip.
And then you're the face that they see. You
And
show up and you're,
I'm paying the money.
oh, man. And then you're like, hey, buddy.
And I'm doing the
We found
liaison.
you.
I would make that same trip, but as
And then they're tried
As the head of the
as
unit.
court-martialed.
well, it depends on what they're really in trouble for. Again, if they're just AWOL, there's probably I don't even know because I wasn't involved in the deal. Do they
You just picked them up.
do they agree to go back and just finish their time,
Oh.
go back to the unit, or what if they've been captured because they committed a civilian crime? If
so-
they've committed a civilian crime, depending on the severity of it, they could end up in Leavenworth.
Oh, my God, that would suck.
Yeah.
That would be horrible. I would never want to go there. Now, did you feel bad for any of these people picking them up? Or
Yeah, it
you
was
just
just a
doing your
job.
job?
Just a job.
And how many would you say that in your term or your
On a good week,
on a good
4,
week?
5, 6.
What?
Well, got to remember,
So it kept you busy.
state of Utah, state of Nevada, and from San Jose to the Oregon border.
And you go, you pick them up, you bring them back, and then you're done with them at this point. It's in someone else's
Right.
hands.
They're in the stockade, and somebody is disposing of them.
This kind of sounds like the Wild West. Like you have a bounty for someone, and you're gonna go pick them up.
Got to remember, though, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and Coast Guard, they didn't have an armed forces police unit. They didn't have armed forces police. They only had the military police.
So this is like 250 people a year that you're getting to.
That's a good guesstimate. But in 1970, when I took over the detail, there were about 60,000 AWOLs and deserters.
Oh my God.
in all 5 branches of the military.
How many people did we even have in the military at the time?
I have no idea. Well, there was, 500,000 in Vietnam.
500,000 people went over and fought in Vietnam, and 60,000 were AWOL deserting
In the United States.
just in the United States.
Yeah. Well, I don't think everybody really can adjust to the military.
Especially when they're drafted.
Exactly.
I don't blame some of them. I mean,
think about it. What if you get drafted and you end up peeling potatoes in the kitchen 7 days a week?
I'd be kind of okay
for
with
2
that.
years.
Well, it's better than going and fighting in the jungle of Vietnam.
True, but
Jeez. I mean, and you have to do 2-year service on your draft? Is that what the enlistment
draft
is?
is 2 years.
Oh, my gosh. And you're just pulled away from wherever you are, like whatever you're doing at the time. Once you get from your draft note, is that what it's called when you get a draft letter?
You get notified that you've been drafted.
And how long do you have until you have to go in?
I don't know because I joined. I was regular Army.
Matt, can you see that? How long from when they got drafted?
I think they had to report to an induction center, probably within 30 days. I don't know.
Probably 30 days. And then
draft notification.
From draft notification to entry into the military. It seemed like the proper route was.
It's got to be like a 30-day.
I was thinking a week, but
to get your affairs in order, right?
I guess. Increase.
Johnson announced the increase in the draft, 17 to 35,000 a month.
It's songs like it's stuff like this that makes songs like War Pigs. You know what I'm talking about? More understandable. You know the song War Pigs by Black Sabbath?
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone does, right? It makes like we're fighting wars for politicians and just being forced to entry into the military.
Yep.
Draft lottery. Oh, they called it a lottery, like you won something.
Yeah, right. That was just a euphemism.
Yeah, you didn't win.
Draft lottery.
God, and then let's see.
Conscription. Yep, you were ordered to appear. I don't see what it says here, please.
And a lot of these people the war started when 1964 or 19.
Now we were in Vietnam in the late 50s. You know, they were Green Beret and other military advisors that were acting in advisory capacity, not being able to do combat in the 50s. There were even Air Force pilots that were not allowed to fly combat missions, but they were in a 2-seated airplane with a Vietnamese pilot in the 50s.
So
anyway, getting back to this deserter and AWOL thing. So here I am in California, but I'm already suffering from PTSD from my first year in Vietnam. And I realized that I was very uncomfortable being in the Army and being in the United States, even though I was doing a great job. So I called a friend of mine at the Pentagon, and I got him to cut me orders to go back to Vietnam a second time.
See, that's so wild to me. I've heard this story so many times.
But I'd rather be in Vietnam than in the United States.
Why?
It was just, it fit my PTSD better.
Did you feel like you were filling a purpose?
I don't know what I was doing.
This is so common. There's individuals today that I hear they go on another tour because they just can't deal with the life over here.
Yeah. Civilian life, being in the Army and in the civilian world was very uncomfortable for a person with PTSD. I really needed to go back to Vietnam, and I did. So I went back to Vietnam in 1971. Went to work for a provost marshal in Military Region 1 out of Da Nang. And I did basically the same thing.
Did you feel better when you got over there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
Much more comfortable.
Wow. And you had different orders at this time. You weren't protecting
No,
the PDO?
I still worked for a provost marshal. He was a colonel in Da Nang. But I created a new detachment. It was called the 5th MP detachment. And it was a little kind of side unit composed of a group of investigators that worked under my supervision. And we did AWOL and deserter apprehension. We did narcotics, black marketeering, and war crimes investigations.
In Vietnam.
In Vietnam.
So now you are...
Now I'm a sergeant.
Oh, so you're gaining
got
rank.
promoted.
You're gaining rank in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Oh, that's... Okay. So you're up too, right? You're private first class to corporal to now sergeant.
Yep.
And what do you end your military service in?
As an E5 sergeant.
Okay.
So I ended my second tour in Vietnam. I got out of Vietnam the second time, my second tour, and I got out of the Army on the same day. Talk about culture shock.
Now, you're over there doing exactly what you were doing in California.
And then some. I mean, I was still trying to track down, mostly they were heroin addicted soldiers that fled from the military bases and were living in the villages under the control of Vietnamese criminals that were feeding their heroin habit, and in exchange they would clean them up and send them onto the military base to steal stuff.
Oh, wow. So they're just using these drug addicts at the time.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, a guy that looked like a regular GI, if he could just jump in a Jeep, start it up, and drive off the base, nobody would stop him.
So this individual, all right, so he leaves. He's going AWOL. He's addicted to heroin. Obviously, I've had my past addiction. When I want what I want, there's a lot that I'll do.
Yep.
Right?
You'll do anything.
Pretty much anything, especially when it comes to a narcotic like that.
Yeah.
When you're in pain, and that's the only thing you're going to think about is ending that pain, right?
Right.
And so now they leave. They're living in these villages that are run by... Are they treated well?
I wouldn't necessarily say that.
I guess it doesn't matter. If
they're active
you're getting your
they're
fix.
active heroin addicts, and really their main purpose is to do whatever they've got to do to support their drug addiction by stealing stuff for the Vietnamese criminals.
And then they're just given kind of heroin in return for it.
Exactly.
And so how many of these guys... is it Long Branch?
No, I was up in Da Nang.
Okay.
I actually took over a former Marine veterinary clinic on China Beach. That was where I lived. That was my base of operations. I had a Quonset hut right across from where I lived. That was my office. But I also had a house in Da Nang. I had a private house that I rented in Da Nang on Leloy Street that I lived in.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it nice?
It was nice.
Oh. Now, could you... All right, so an individual, they leave, they're living in these villages, and they're being fed.
They're being groomed.
Extorted.
They're being provided with heroin to support their habit, and they're being groomed to clean up their act so that they could go back on military bases, either use PX cards to buy electronics, booze, cigarettes, clothing at the PX, bring it back to the village, and then the Vietnamese could then sell it on the black market. Or, better than that, they would jump in a deuce and a half, a Jeep, a 1 1/4 ton truck, a tow truck, Army tow truck, and just drive it off the base and drive it into the village. And then the Vietnamese would take it and use it for private purpose.
Now, so it was mainly goods that they were trying to then get. It wasn't intel. It wasn't.
No, it was merchandise.
Oh, wow.
It fueled the black
imagine
market.
Being a Vietnamese individual that's, obviously against the war that's going on, and just being like, we're going to use these Americans right now.
We'll take advantage of the logistical system that was set up to create a false sense of comfort for the GIs that were actually fighting the war. That's what it was.
Okay, so now I'm back on your side. Now I'm back on your side. I'm not saying I wasn't on your side, but now as a provost officer, you're saying I need to go find these AWOL deserters so they're not now hurting the United States.
Well, yeah, it was more to. I didn't see it as that they were hurting the United States. It was more capturing them to hold them responsible for their obligation to serve out the rest of their service requirement in the military.
All
I
right.
didn't provide them with medical care.
Now, how was so you didn't care too much about like what they were going through as a heroin addict at the time?
No,
You didn't care at the time. Would you have say you would do it now? Would you feel a little different?
I'm saying.
Say if you had that job today, would you have a different kind of compassion towards those individuals?
Oh, I'm sure I would.
Yeah. Are you going into the villages and finding these people now?
Yep.
You as the individual, not just your team. You're going into the
Well,
villages.
I'm using the Vietnamese police. I had to have a contingent of Vietnamese local police to I would actually use them as the tip of the spear.
You trust them?
No.
Okay. So you would use them to go and say, "Hey, we have a deserter." They come back and say, "Hey, we have a deserter that's hanging out in this village."
Well, I would gain intelligence through either Vietnamese prostitutes or local village officials that would mention the fact that there was a GI or more than one GI living in a village, and he was being used as a pawn for some local drug dealer or criminal element that was then sending them back onto the base to steal shit.
And then you would load up into a Jeep and
We
head
would
out.
we would create an operations plan to go conduct a raid in a village to try to go capture the GI who was.
Oh my God. So now let's just give me a scenario where you're driving into this village and you know one or many are in there that you need to go
Right.
round up.
Mm-hmm.
Are you met with hostile?
Oh, sometimes they would be shooting at us, yeah.
And you'd show up to a village and you would just, all right, now let's search the entire village until we find
Well,
this guy?
sometimes the information, I actually knew which hut or hooch the guy was in. Sometimes I knew because he had a known girlfriend. Maybe he even had a baby via Vietnamese woman.
Okay.
And, the gossip.
Are you thinking of a specific scenario in your head right now that there was one guy who had a baby?
Several.
And
They would get these Vietnamese women pregnant.
oh, I wonder where those children are at today.
Who knows?
You know, it's like this is who my dad was. Now you're going in and you find this guy, he's in a hut, and you have vivid memory of opening up a door and seeing the guy right there and being like,
Yep.
and what's his reaction?
Well, sometimes they were armed and they didn't want to cooperate, and sometimes you just had to get the drop on them,
Really? What do you mean? Explain it.
Just hold at gunpoint. You got to take them into custody at gunpoint.
And they most of them didn't go. Did some just go, all right, you got me?
Some,
Most didn't.
I think there was an inclination to try to escape, but it was futile.
Anyone end in
No, nobody got killed.
that's what I was gonna ask. Yeah.
There were gun battles, but they were brief, and usually we overwhelmed them.
Okay. So
Because I used like 6 or 8 South Vietnamese military police officers and local police, plus my investigators. I had 6 or 8 guys.
I'm trying to put myself in your shoes where I'm picturing being in a Jeep. You got this guy out of a village. You put him in the back seat of your car,
In the Jeep.
and you're riding the back, and he's sitting there going, "Oh shit, I'm caught. I'm done. This is over."
Yeah, I'm sure it was an overwhelming experience for someone who's an active addict.
Yeah.
And on top of that, they have to deal with the reality that their freedom is now over.
Yeah. I mean,
So
even
their freedom to feed their addiction and also not be in the military.
And the things they did under the influence, that when I've done things under the influence that I felt like I was almost possessed to do, and now I have to live with those things that I've done. And now it's, I mean, for someone to be sitting in the back seat being like, shoot, like, where do I go from here? Like,
I mean, I will say we did not get much operational intelligence from the GIs that we captured.
they probably didn't tell them anything.
They were in a bad way. I mean, literally, they were already withdrawing.
Now their life has to begin where it's like, I've just done these things. I'm addicted to heroin. Now his or her life is, now he's got to fight a completely different battle when he gets home.
There were also other drugs. You know, because the French colonized Vietnam, the French pharmaceutical kiosk was still very much alive in South Vietnam. The Vietnamese ran their pharmacies under the French model, but there were no prescriptions.
I don't know what that means. What do you mean?
There were just other pharmaceutical drugs available to GIs if they were willing to pay for them.
What was the other drugs?
There was a drug called meprobamate.
I don't know what that is.
And Maxitone was a French diet drug, which was
so like
literally
an amphetamine?
liquid amphetamine. It came in these little glass, hermetically sealed glass vials.
All right, so it wasn't just heroin; it was amphetamines.
It was mostly heroin.
Yeah, okay.
And a lot of weed.
Oh, really? God, if there was one guy
Tons of weed.
going into the
I
base.
mean, we're talking sandbags filled with weed.
Oh, my God. If I was getting used for weed, I'd be so upset.
Was there any rehab for these GIs you picked up?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, there were always evacuation hospitals. There was an evac hospital in Da Nang, but I really wasn't involved in knowing what, if any, medical care they got after they were returned to their unit. I have no clue.
That sounds horrible. So now
I will say the only difference that I did notice in leaving Vietnam in '72, they did do urine testing.
Okay. So it wasn't.
But
Well, there's that.
but to what extent, you know?
It makes you grateful for the world that we live in today that they classify it now as a disease. Because, I mean, if I can only take my own experience into account, that when you're going through that type of struggle, it is you're kind of being classified, it seems like at that time, as like a loser, as a
Subhuman.
yeah, because you're addicted to this substance, and now we consider it, a mental issue that we deal with way differently today than it sounds like you did back then. So you take them, you put them in jail, and now they're just gonna have to deal with this addiction that they've gotten, that they've acquired over there in a war they didn't even want to fight.
Right.
Yeah, that's rough. And then they're not even welcomed when they come back to the United States.
I don't think anybody really expected a welcome. I mean, no, I know I didn't.
I think it was the one war that the GIs were welcomed least in American history, coming back overseas. The soldiers in Vietnam that were the least welcomed.
I don't know. I didn't really have that feeling when I got out of Vietnam and out of the Army at the same time.
When you came back after your second tour, where'd you go? Brooklyn?
I flew from Vietnam to Seattle-Tacoma Airport, SeaTac Airport in Washington.
Uh-huh.
And I was really processed in the course of it was just a blinding whirlwind of 24 hours where I signed a bunch of documents swearing not to reveal information about the shit that I was involved in Vietnam. I also signed some kind of a document that they could recall me.
What does that mean?
To duty if there was some sort of a national emergency.
Are you breaching
No,
these contracts right now?
I think it is expired. Jesus, I'm 75 years old now. But there was a period of time where you were still under the authority or of the military. And then I remember I think I had a dental checkup. I don't even know if I got any shots. The big thing I remember is I had to choose between a 3/4 length OD green raincoat or a field jacket.
When you got out,
Yeah.
like as
coat.
as a parting gift.
Yeah, as a parting gift. I picked the field jacket, of course.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it was weird. And then you got a one-way ticket to wherever you wanted to go. And I ended up, of course, my parents lived in Brooklyn at the time in the projects, so I just wanted a ticket to JFK.
And that's where you went. So, so you did 2 tours.
Yeah.
And what's you don't have any wild stories from that second tour? Like you don't have one where you're just like, I'm never gonna forget this one. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but
I mean, there were a lot of strange shit that I was involved in, but it was on a case-by-case basis. I mean, there was recovering bloated bodies out of the Da Nang River that were humans that were unrecognizable. You know, I was called often because they thought they were American. They were Caucasian males. And more times than not, they turned out to be Vietnamese that became so bloated and rotted, you couldn't tell that they weren't Caucasians. Wow. I also used to do some war crimes investigations where we'd find out about units where guys were carrying, human ears or had a skull with a candle in it on it for a hooch decoration, or
what's that movie with Marlon
shit.
Brando?
Oh,
Apocalypse Now.
yeah.
Have you ever seen that, Matt?
Yeah,
He goes crazy like that, where I can see him having the skull
I
candle.
don't know. That's not a realistic.
I don't think it ever.
depiction
I
of
don't. When I watched it, I don't ever thought. But he's a deserter, isn't he?
Yeah,
He
but he was a colonel. Their essence. The Phoenix program in Vietnam was real, and that was a belief that the U.S. government felt they could beat back the communist invasion by killing communist sympathizers up the food chain from the village level up. Villages were ruled or controlled by village elders. I don't know if they had mayors, but they certainly had elder statesmen and representatives of the village. If they had communist leanings, the Vietnamese, the Phoenix program was actually an assassination program that was sent out into these villages to kill communist sympathizers in that low level of government, and that was out of control in Vietnam.
And that's part of what Apocalypse Now was about. Was the Phoenix program?
Well, I don't know, but I think you could see a similarity between that, but the way this colonel, whatever the hell his name was,
Yeah,
was supposedly, he killed so many people because he was determined to kill communists. He just became a killing machine, and he became a psycho.
Well, I feel like it was just he became. Didn't he? If I saw this movie a while ago, doesn't he kind of become a leader of a village at one point? Doesn't he kind of run?
Yeah, but that was all like supposedly hallucinogenic, triggered by. I don't know that that's got any basis in reality.
It's a wild movie. Watching that, but it's supposed to be Marlon Brando.
Yeah, exactly.
Is like the greatest actor doing at the time,
Of course.
doing this different role. But so you didn't ever so any of these deserters that weren't addicted to heroin that actually went into the village and because you ever hear the stories of when America was being colonized, there was individuals that would join Native American tribes, and they just loved being in the tribe, right? They would join these tribes, wouldn't know where they were. A lot of the French did this. The French would take a lot of Native American wives because the
And they would be assimilated.
And yes, they'd be and they didn't want to leave. Like Last Mohicans, I think was even part like that movie. They go into it a little bit where they and the French, the Native Americans were, they liked the French way more than they liked the British, but they would then they were a lot kinder, I guess, but they would enjoy being in these tribes and they didn't want to go back. And was there anybody over there that would join in the Vietnamese tribes in the jungle and be like, you know what, this is a better way of life?
I didn't have the occasion to run into people that, I mean, there were other groups of people in Vietnam at the time. There were missionaries. The Germans had a presence, a humanitarian presence in Vietnam. I used to have some good meals. The Germans maintained a hospital ship that was docked in Da Nang when I was there in '71. It was called the Helgoland.
Okay, what is that?
It was a German hospital ship, and they did humanitarian medical treatment for Vietnamese in a humanitarian sense. HELGOLAND.
Humanitarian mission. When I hear mission work, I hear religion.
HELGO.
HELGO.
Helgoland hospital ship.
Ship of Hope, built in 1963.
Yep.
Whoa, did you say transported Happy Tourist? A ship where civilians from both sides were treated.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
I had some great meals on that boat.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah.
Well, it was the last resort for many Vietnamese. It was the last resort.
Yep.
So this was a Red Cross.
Well, humanitarian hospital ship that was in Vietnam, in Da Nang. And
I've never heard of this.
Yep.
The referee. Okay. So they were a humanitarian group that would go over there and
10 doctors, 30 nurses, German Red Cross. Okay, very good.
So they no involvement in the war other than we're going to help out people who are injured, right?
Sick and injured.
And
you know, it's like the hearts and minds thing. In Vietnam, the U.S. military had these things called medcaps or I forget I think they were called medcaps, where they would put together groups of doctors and nurses and dentists, and they would send them into these villages to pull teeth, set bones, lance boils, remove cysts, all under the guise of winning over the hearts and minds of the Vietnamese people by providing free medical care.
What is going on in Germany at the time that they're thinking we need to go be, the hope that can hope?
I think people that are humanitarians
Someone's got to fund it though.
In conflict, I don't know where the funding came from, but I know it was. It
says free funding.
Yeah, it was a very loved hospital ship in Da Nang.
And they would take you on and send you back out?
I don't know. They were treating people for all sorts.
You had meals on it, right?
Well, just as a liaison. I just got invited. I was invited on just to have to break bread with them.
Was it one boat or many boats?
No, that one boat.
Just one boat. How
it.
big is this boat?
Pretty big.
Like, how many people would it house, or could it take on?
Several hundred.
And so would they would be on the coast of wherever there was a battle, and then they
were docked in Da Nang on the. I don't know where they sailed to, because the only place that I had contact with them was in Da Nang.
And would they send out little John boats to go grab the individual, then ship them back to the boat? Or they were shipped at a dock.
I think people
or they were
came
docked
to
at
them.
They were what?
People came to them.
And they were set up. They were docked somewhere. It wasn't like.
Yeah, right in Da Nang. Matter of fact, I used to eat at a French restaurant right across from the pier from where the boat was. That's how I first saw it. I was having a meal in a restaurant in Vietnam, actually having lobster thermidor.
Okay.
Very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And then I saw the boat, and I became curious. So I went over there and I met them, and
92 meters, so 300 feet long. So, oh, that's a big boat.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a football field.
300 feet long.
Oh, that's a football. That's a large boat.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's big. And you go on, and how do you get invited to get on this boat?
They were just very friendly.
You were having dinner at a French restaurant. You look up, you notice a boat.
Yeah.
And there's,
Or you can't miss the big red.
yeah, and you thought, what
big
is
red
that?
boat,
And they
yeah.
said, come on, we'll show you.
No, the Vietnamese said, "Oh, it's a medical hospital ship." So I just went over there one day and just introduced myself, and they were very friendly.
Speaking German?
No, they spoke English.
Oh,
I don't speak German.
yeah. Yeah, that's wild. I've never heard of anything like that.
Yeah,
And I did see that one of the things they treated was napalm burns
Well,
constantly, right? How?
well, napalm was dropped by the airplanes, and it was a liquid fuel mixture that was
Horrible.
dispensed like a gel, and it stuck to you.
Yeah. Banned after this war. Banned during the war, wasn't it?
That and
Nerve gas.
white phosphorus is a chemical in artillery shells, and it's actually a chemical in the form of a burning mineral, and when it landed on your skin, it would just continue to burn.
That's horrible. They would
Because
just
it's fueled by oxygen.
and they would just drop this
Yeah.
as a just blanket, right?
Blanket bombing. Yeah, carpet bombing.
God, I
Crazy, right?
it's wild, and I don't understand. So
So here's an interesting aside. You talk about how we corrupted their whole social fabric of the country was corrupted by the American way of life, and that's really fueled the black market. I mean, Vietnamese in the 50s, this was an agrarian economy. They grew food to eat, to survive. They didn't know menthol cigarettes, spearmint gum, bell-bottom jeans, sunglasses, stereos, right? They didn't know any of that stuff. So during my second tour in Vietnam, as I said, my office where my investigators and I worked was in a Quonset hut right across the road from where I lived in this abandoned marine veterinary clinic,
okay,
because they had air conditioning and they had room. One of the operating rooms was my bedroom. It was kind of nice. Anyway, in the Quonset hut, I came to work one day during a monsoon, and the winds are like 200-mile-an-hour winds. It's raining sideways. We're inside this Quonset hut, and all of a sudden, the wind blew up and the building shuddered and it collapsed on us, right? Fortunately, everybody dove for cover. I dove under my desk. Other guys dove in other directions. And when the storm was over, we were trying to figure out why the building collapsed. Well, as it turns out, the Quonset hut was erected using wooden beams, and it was all done by the Vietnamese, probably, that were hired by PA&E or RMKBRJ, and they didn't use nails to put the wood together. What they did was they notched the wooden beams and they used coat hangers, and they tightened the coat hangers, and that kept all the wooden beams intact with the shell of the corrugated metal over the top of it. And because of the salt water from the China Beach, not eventually, but sooner rather than later, all of the coat hangers rusted and fell apart and dissolved into rust. And the building was literally just standing under its own weight. And none of the beams were attached to each other.
so there was no OSHA. There was nobody like
OSHA?
yeah.
No.
There was nobody.
We're just lucky we didn't get killed.
I mean,
And that's how...
do you think they did it on purpose, or do you think this is just how they built things?
I think if they were given nails, they knew the nails had more value to them on the black market.
Oh.
And why not use coat hangers and just notch the wood and take a coat hanger and tighten it and
Keep the nails, sell the nails.
no, well, it'll keep the wood together
Yeah.
for as long as the coat hanger lasts, which is I don't know how long does a coat hanger last in salt water.
You
I
tell
don't
me.
think very
I don't know.
long.
Yeah. Do you know we're talking about the napalm and stuff? Do you know what place in the world has been bombed the most?
I don't.
I think it's Laos. Look up how many bombs were dropped in Laos during Vietnam.
And Cambodia probably.
It is.
Because we illegally fought the war, the Vietnam War in Cambodia and Laos constantly.
270 million cluster bombs, heavily bombed country per capita. Yeah, the most heavily bombed country per capita in history.
30% did not explode. Geez, so
But that's insane. Laos is not that big, right?
yeah, decent sized country, but doesn't matter.
I mean, that sounds like almost like a genocide. You're just dropping that many bombs on one country.
Well, that's where the Ho Chi Minh Trail ran.
Was through Laos?
Uh-huh.
Explain the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
It went from North Vietnam. It skirted the border of South Vietnam, and it went down on the Laotian side of the boundary and the Cambodian side of the boundary with Vietnam. And then they would peel off and enter South Vietnam from the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which was literally in Laos and Cambodia.
What is the significance of the Ho Chi Minh Trail?
It's the impromptu highway for the North Vietnamese army to infiltrate into South Vietnam.
Yeah, but what was the significance of those? Wasn't there
That's Ho Chi
mass?
Minh. There it is, right there.
Wasn't there a lot of people killed along the Ho Chi Minh Trail or something that what was it that the big event that happened on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, or was it just the main highway? Is that all it was?
It wasn't really a highway. It was more of a path that was built and maintained in varying degrees of completeness through the jungle and areas in
And it traveled
north to south, and some of it was wooden, some of it was packed earth, some of it was it wasn't asphalt or concrete. It was just dirt trails. Some of it was wide enough for trucks to be driven on. Trucks and jeeps.
Have you been on the Ho Chi Minh? Were you on the Ho Chi Minh? No. And is there a lot of fighting that happens on the Ho Chi Minh Trail then, I guess?
Well, I think the U.S. military attempted to detect movement on the Ho Chi Minh Trail using various means. And if they did detect a presence, they would attack that spot with aerial bombardment. And also, I guess if they had certain artillery that could reach it.
All right, so you do your...
The Air Force had listening posts, secret bases in Laos and Cambodia that they would actually use to try to detect the movement of the communists through the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Now you do your second tour. It ends. I'm sure you experienced a different type of PTSD, or just like
It flourished.
And you come back to the United States. There's no third tour.
No, I actually got out of Vietnam and out of the Army on the same day. I received my honorable discharge.
So this is 2 years. You did 2 years, or you did 3 years? And are you still in the Army when you come back to the United States?
Technically, I am, but not really.
So you're just released, your service is done, and you become a police officer?
No, I just am just a civilian looking for something to do.
Really? And you don't use any of this that you learned over here to use back in the United States?
Actually, No, I actually went back to college, studied the various individual subjects, liberal arts, some economics. There was a educational program where the military funded your college education. They provided you with a stipend to go to college.
Like a GI Bill?
Yeah, kind of. Forget what it was called. Let me see. That was 72. I went to work at the New York Daily News. My father got me a job at the Daily News in Brooklyn at the Brooklyn plant, and I was doing photo engraving work. I was in order to produce the newspaper. These huge cylinders, steel cylinders, were plated with copper, and then they took these semi-permeable membranes and they would apply them to the copper and etch them with acid, and that created the dots that the ink was retained in when the press spun, when these cylinders spun, and they were red, yellow, blue, black, and that's how the newspaper was created.
But I mean, when you leave, you don't have this thought of when you left your first tour and you wanted to go back to your second tour, you didn't have a feeling of, well, I got to go back and do this again.
You mean the military?
Like and rejoin the military,
no,
yeah.
I had no desire to stay in the military. I really didn't.
So that feeling you had the first time, it didn't.
I don't even remember anybody asking me if I wanted to re-enlist.
Really?
No.
Huh.
I just walked away from it.
Hey.
Now, he still enjoyed law enforcement, and I will say by that time I was engaged to my now wife, and I did express a desire to want to get back into law enforcement. And by 1974, we did get married in February 9th of 1974, and we packed up a 12-foot U-Haul truck and moved from the East Coast back to San Francisco.
Oh, okay. Do you keep in contact with any of these other people that were on your team?
No.
Nobody. Did you ever?
No.
So when you walked away from the military, you stepped away from any relationships that you had in the military, everything?
No reunions, no.
Was that because it was too hard, or you just...
No, I don't think...
Or it was just something you did, you carried on?
Yeah.
You just carried
that
on,
was
moved
then,
on.
This is now.
Do you regret any of it?
No.
Okay. There's nothing that you did that you're like, maybe we shouldn't be doing this.
Do I think the war was not... Yeah, I don't think the war was good. The war was bad.
Yeah, are you like, do you feel like... Okay, what do you mean like the war wasn't good? Because
all war's bad.
100%.
I mean, that's, you know...
So you just felt like you were given a task, a set of things to do. You went over, you did it, you came home.
To the best of my ability.
Yeah. And then that was that.
Did I get medals and awards? Sure, but all that made me as a decorated disabled Vietnam veteran.
Oh, were you injured when you were over there?
Not physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually.
Yeah. And then, I mean, we don't have to talk about that, but it carries over into your later life then.
Carried it with me my whole life.
When do you find a spiritual program then?
When my peak of despair didn't occur until 2015.
Really? And then you found it was a spiritual program that led...
Well, what happened was, I was self-medicating for a long time, from 72 up until 2015.
You never tried to seek any kind of care for the PTSD?
I had no idea I had it.
Oh, wow. What do you mean? Like,
I just thought it was character defects, Was I overweight? Yeah. I was a carbohydrate addict. Didn't know that. Was I addicted to nicotine? Yes. Did I know that? No. I just thought I enjoyed chewing tobacco, smoking cigars, cigarettes, and pipes. Right? Recreational drug use? Absolutely. Drugs and alcohol? Did I think I had an addiction? No.
Really?
But I have a very strong ego. Very self-centered. very self-assured, very confident in my ability to do what I have to do in order to make a life for myself. So that tips the scales. It's a big distraction.
Well, of trying to make sure that you have this good life that you're living, and then
Well, there was the good Roy and the bad Roy.
okay.
I didn't think they were ever going to meet.
Oh, and what they met in 2015,
Yeah.
and then, I mean, it's the way mental illness is so much different today, especially the way that people seek therapy today, the way that people, they'll seek it for anything, for the slightest little inconvenience. They'll say, "Oh, I need therapy now for it." Where it seemed like back then, and it could just be your generation. You just carried on. It seemed like it wasn't always, "Oh, I have to stop and think about the last year of my life. What was good? What was bad? What do I need to adjust? Should I work on anything so it doesn't affect me?"
There was no introspection there. I never looked within myself to see what I was really doing to myself.
I mean, there's part of it that I'm kind of envious of, where I wish I could just carry on most of the time instead of thinking back on whatever trauma, because that's a big word these days, trauma I had. It just seems like it'd be easier if I just carried on a little bit more, which I do still feel like I do today, but I do have the guides of, a spiritual program and such now, which is extremely helpful. It just, at least it helps me self-evaluate a little bit differently than just saying, carry on. What happened.
I have a clarity that I never had before.
Well, that's good.
Very much more at peace and much more calm than I used to be. I used to have panic attacks and anxiety all the time, but I never knew it. I thought I had extra energy.
Oh, wow. That's what you thought. It would come out as extra energy?
Oh, yeah. I used to run 70 to 80 miles a week.
Well, I do that sometimes. Well, I haven't done that in a while, but
Yep.
I've done that before.
About 10 to 12 miles a day. Every morning before I'd go to work.
Well, I mean, I'm a runner, and I have, in my times of sobriety before, I've signed up for marathons, and I've pushed out 50, 60 miles a week. I don't think I've ever ran over, I think 63 is maybe.
Yeah, now I run about 40, 45, 40, 50 miles.
Oh, you still do it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good. I just did a run last week.
Did you?
I did the hot chocolate run.
Oh, cool.
It was a 10K, so nothing big, right? But I do, as of last night, I believe I have a bib for the Broad Street run that I got from someone, and then
Really?
I'll do a half.
You got a gift.
Yeah. And they're just giving it away. They got
Nice.
hurt, so they're possibly going to give it away.
Well, Broad Street's flat and fast. You should have fun doing
The
it.
run I just did was flat and fast. I did it in 45 minutes. So
No
I did
way.
it quick, 7:23 pace. It was nice. It felt really good, and I hadn't done that in a while.
Yeah.
But I also, I don't know, because like what you just said worries me a little bit, because the last time I did a run, it was just over 2 years ago, and it was a marathon. And then the last 2 years of my life, from my last run to this run, it was it was nice. I was a little emotional on that last 2 miles of that run, because it hit me. I went, oh my God, Frank, from your last run to this run, a lot has occurred. A lot of destruction has occurred. A lot of trying and failing has occurred. And it was emotional in a way of being like, oh, I finally got back here. I finally got back to, I didn't even know that I needed to be here. But a lot happened. Let's just say from my marathon 2 years ago, I had no idea where my life was going to end up. From a breakup to where I end up, the things that I did, the uses of what I was using, all of it. So, but then you saying, you kind of substituted maybe some extra energy or your panic, whatever it was, into running. I find myself doing that at times. I do have a lot of energy. And I don't need as much sleep, I don't think, and it's a little worrisome when you say that, going, oh, shoot.
Well, I need my sleep.
Yeah.
I just never got it when I was in, my PTSD was out of control. Because not only did I have anxiety and panic attacks, I also had depression in the afternoons and insomnia.
Yeah, I got that too. I don't know. But you're still running 45 miles a week? You're still putting out, so what's your long run?
I don't run I don't do real long runs anymore. My long run for the week used to be like 17. Back when I was really running a lot, but I don't do that anymore. If I can run 6 miles a day, it's fine.
Yeah, my minimums are about 6. I'm okay with it. Like I do 6. I'm completely like that's an easy run.
For me, it's a way of relaxing. It's almost Zen-like.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of my early victories in running was I learned to run without my hands being clenched.
Wow, I do it.
And I started by running with 2 uncooked eggs.
Oh, wow.
Just because it gave me a sense of what could happen if I clenched my fist too much. Because I wanted to keep the energy in my core.
Oh, wow.
And I think I read it in Runner's World magazine. Just a great tip would be, if you have a hard time remembering not to clench your fists, just run with a couple of raw eggs in your hands. And it only took about a week.
Did you break any eggs?
No.
Oh.
But I realized I didn't need them anymore.
But that's impressive at your age to be able to do those kind of runs still.
Yeah. I mean, I've had torn meniscus, but I had a great orthopedic surgeon, and he scoped both of my knees and cleaned them up, and I'm fine.
Do you feel like after 2015 you were finally able to start to address and deal with some of the things that happened back in 1969 to 1972?
I did when I got clean and sober.
Yeah. And then now the roughage of your past you were able to come to light with, and
I think it's a more realistic understanding of what PTSD is.
And
for me.
And the program actually helped you.
It does.
That's amazing. So it helped you come to an understanding of how, like, through just by working it.
So at my peak of despair, this was in the summer of 2015. I made several really lousy, terrible decisions that resulted in my losing my job and my pension. And that sent me into a crazy headspace where I just couldn't think, do anything. I was just in a terrible place. I broke some laws. I had to appear in court. Bless you. And I was just a heap of nothingness, I was a shattered human being. And I was in the throes of this deep fear of the unknown and depression. And I was home with my wife. And I hadn't slept or eaten or bathed or done anything. I was just a mess, I didn't want to answer the door. The phone rang. It would freak me out. I didn't want to even see mail. I didn't want to open mail. It was like a lot of crazy.
Oh, I've been there.
Feeling of total.
Oh, I've been there.
Schizo, just mindset,
It's like almost paralysis. You can't do anything.
It was a September in 2015. And it was a Saturday morning. I was home with my wife, and we wake up and we're trying to have our coffee in the morning. And my mind, I was so twisted around. I had all this anxiety, nervous energy, and I dragged 3 long guns out to my shed, 2 rifles and a shotgun, and I was so out of sorts with myself. I didn't know what to do with myself, but one by one I took these long guns out to my shed, and I ended up chopping them up with a sawzall, a hacksaw, a cold chisel, and a ball peen hammer, one at a time. Just kept going in the house, grabbing a rifle, taking it out to my shed. It took me like 2.5 hours, and Jill, my wife, heard me making a racket in the shed, but she didn't know what I was doing.
And why were you doing it? Out of fear?
I don't know why I did it. I probably did it because, I don't know. I don't even know why. But I did. I chopped them up and the pieces, triple bagged them in garbage bags, threw them in the garbage, and then I sat down with my wife, and I'm trying to have a cup of coffee with her.
Yeah. That's
In my
wild.
bathrobe, unshaven, unbathed. I hadn't eaten. I was just and here I am trying to act all like Mr. Mr. Congeniality. And I turned to my wife and I said, I can't help myself.
Awesome. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I had no idea those words were even going to come out of my mouth. I can't save myself.
Yeah.
Wow. And that was the only thing that I was able to convey to her what was going on with me at that moment.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of other things going on with me that I had no control of, but I put into play because of my crazy behavior. But she was ready. She had the laptop out on our deck. She opens the laptop. There was a little window on the screen. Said Veterans Hotline, 1-800 number. She hands me the phone. I dial the hotline. Some guy answered, and I told him what I was feeling, and he said, do you think you can get to the VA hospital in West Philly? And I said, no. And he said, well, why not? I said, well, the Pope-a-thon's going on in Philly that day, and Philly was like not open for business when the Pope was visiting.
Yeah, I remember.
Right? That was that Saturday morning. And he said, well, do you think your wife would drive you to the East Orange VA hospital? And I handed her the phone back to Jill. The guy gave her directions. She poured me into the car, and off we went to the emergency room in East Orange, New Jersey. And that was the beginning of my recovery.
So you're kind of a white chip wonder in a way. So you didn't.
Wow, thank
know
God
that.
for the VA hotline.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you think that's just like an accumulation of all of that trauma, PTSD piled up right into that day?
Where I had nothing.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I had a sense of survival that allowed me to at least say to my wife those 4 words. I can't save myself.
It's probably the best 4 words you could ever said. That's an awesome realization.
I know.
And because I feel like once I said those words, because I have said that before, and I didn't always stay sober at the time, but that I can't help myself is that's just like the complete surrender of going, whatever it is, just somebody else,
little things
something else
happen.
help me out.
I was on the gurney in the emergency room at East Orange, and a nurse came in and she gave me a tuna fish sandwich on white bread. It was like filet mignon.
Yeah, that good.
I hadn't eaten in so long, I had forgotten what real food tasted like. I mean, granted, it was only a tuna fish sandwich on white bread, but man, it was great. Yeah. And I think it broke down a small barrier, because the next thing I know, there were a couple of medical people in there, and they were asking me if I'd be willing to sign myself into a psychiatric hospital, a veterans psychiatric hospital. And I signed the form, minor victory, small little. And the next thing I know, they're loading me on the gurney, and they're putting me in an ambulance, and they're driving me to Lyons, which is the big veterans campus in Bernardsville, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And next thing I know, I'm in a psychiatric unit.
Wow, yeah.
In a place where I can't hurt myself, and people are checking on me, and they're giving me 3 square meals a day and a couple of snacks, and I'm getting evaluated every day, sometimes twice a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was nice. They even shaved me.
Oh.
I was such a mess. One of the medical staff actually shaved me.
That's kind of nice.
Yeah, it was real nice.
Yeah.
It's like I knew why they were shaving me, because they couldn't trust me with a safety razor.
Yeah.
But you know what? Whatever it took.
Yeah, that's nice. Well, is there anything else you want to say?
No.
I really appreciate it, Roy. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Good luck with your endeavor.
Yeah, thank you.